Who better than me?
Welcome back to another episode of the Hardcore Casual with your boy, Base the Kid. Thank you for the new subscribers that came in over the weekend and Monday. I truly appreciate it. Please like and subscribe, click the notification button, share the vid. I'm on my way. Now, this vid is actually gonna kind of be a segue from what happened over the weekend with the light heavyweights and how that's maybe changed the landscape a little bit, or possibly not at all. We'll find out. But just before I get into that, I just want to, obviously, the quick news that the arbitration with Dillian Whyte and Tyson Fury and, Dillian Whyte and the WBC has now kind of ended, it seems like, because the WBC have now officially called Dillian Whyte as mandatory for the WBC title. And as of yesterday, they had the 30 days now to negotiate. I'm very interested to see what's going to happen, because I don't think a deal is going to be struck. I think it's going to go to purse bid, because any deal that gets struck means that there's rematch clauses and whatnot. I don't think Dillian wants to have to deal with that saga of 2 fights if he wins. So I think he may just long it out, unless they come up with a mad purse. And the fact that I think the arbitration's done now, so clearly he must have gotten quite close to that 45% he's entitled to as an interim champion. If it comes to a purse bid, I'm not sure about what Top Rank and BT Sport and all the others would try and offer him outside of that. And also, I guess, maybe just in general negotiations, Eddie Hearn can talk to DAZN now and see what kind of bag DAZN will put up for that fight. Sky Sports as well. I mean, they'll definitely look like they'll probably jump in with a bid, because if it's a purse bid, then that means everyone's a free for all. So, congrats to Dillian. Obviously not ideal. Not boxing since last March. So when that fight takes place, which would likely be March, April, maybe May time next year, it's like 14 months out the ring, 12 to 14, so it's not great on that side, but finally getting the shot, regardless of who the shot's against, like the shot's coming now, it's there finally. So yeah, big up to him. Now, so obviously we had Lyndon Arthur, Anthony Yarde 2 over the weekend. Anthony Yarde scored a very impressive 4th round KO. It was actually probably the best performance he's had, as in his 24 fights that I've seen. There was nothing sort of laboured about it. It was intent. Like, there was a lot of actually good head movement. He was picking decent punches. He wasn't being overawed in the clinches, even though like he was maybe losing those exchanges. I feel like he might have been losing them a bit on purpose, understanding that Arthur might have been trying to tire him out, so he almost just went a bit soft in the clinches just to conserve that energy, which was all cool. After that, Frank Warren came out with a statement earlier on today, technically it was yesterday, but basically saying that Lyndon's team, if Lyndon won the fight, he would remain with Frank. And there was obviously a lot of strained relationships, because he had to go to the board and deal with signed contracts or whatnot. But the team said that if we lose, we want our contract to be torn up with you. So now that kind of throws into question, did Lyndon potentially underperform on purpose? Was this a way to get out of the contract with Queensberry? I'm not taking anything away from Anthony's performance, but we all saw the fight, and I mean, Lyndon didn't look as confident as he normally does. He didn't look as switched on as he normally does. When he walked out the ring, he was smiling. So, don't know, mate. Who knows? But that throws into question to me some of the validity to the victory. Just in the sense of where I now put him in those rankings. So I need to see one more before I can make a solid effort. But it's going to be my top 10. And I'm going to go from 10 to 1. And starting with my 10th person. Now this at the moment is controversial, but I'm going to give a reason for each person. Right. My number 10 light heavyweight is John Ryder. Now I had a bit of a disagreement with Danny from Fight Fan TV about this earlier, because on BoxRec he's still showing up as a super middle. However, his last 2 fights have been competed within the light heavyweight limit. One of them at like 170 point something and the other one like 173. And by all reports, he was supposed to be fighting Bivol at some point next year. Or so it's either supposed to be Bivol or David Morrell. Yeah. Now, if he fights Morrell, he's back at 168, and I can retract this in the next another video and take him out of that particular list. But right now, he's who I've got at number 10. Right, number 9, Shakan Pitters. Now, I feel that Shakan's got a lot of good potential. As a tall 6'6" guy, I feel he doesn't use his height and his natural advantages of being so tall to his advantage, especially against a lot of guys who are generally only going to be like 6'1", 6 foot. I mean, Anthony Yarde, I believe, is like 5'11", 6 at a push. Realistically, you should be able to keep them kind of guys away from you for quite a lot of time in any fight, just behind the jab, behind the straight rights, not allowing them to come in or forcing them to have to try and rush their way in and be able to pick them off in that way. But he got out jabbed by Craig Richards. Even the last fight he had to come through some quite tricky moments in that one. So there's a lot of potential there. I mean, personally, I think being 6'6", you should be at a cruiser as a minimum, if I'm honest. Like, pack on a little bit of extra size, compete at like 185, 190, go up to cruiser. But yeah, number 9, Shakan Pitters. And number 8 is Rocky Fielding. So yeah, Rocky's officially in the light heavyweight division. Now, a lot of this is basically based off of what he done as a super middle. But I mean, he was a regular world champion. I know it doesn't mean a huge amount, but he beat John Ryder. He's had, pretty good victories within that particular division, and I reckon he's worthy of being number 8. Yeah. All right. So now my number 7 is Lyndon Arthur. Now previously I had Arthur at number 2 or number 3, in and around there. And this isn't all based on the eye test. It's also based on the resume and the quality of opponents. So Lyndon beat Anthony, which we all kind of raved about a bit. I said, well, look, he's the only one now that's undefeated apart from Buatsi, so you kind of have to have him up there. But Anthony's resume weren't the strongest. There was the Kovalev fight, which was a loss, and then there was the Dex Bowman fight, which was probably the best opponent you could really say was on the record. So yeah, when I've looked back at it, Obviously, he had a very, very poor performance over the weekend. Looked like a deer in the headlights. Couldn't even pop off the jab that was his best weapon, and he had one of the best jabs in the light heavyweight division, yet allowed it to be totally nullified by someone who we had seen previously struggle to deal with a jab from most people, even like the journeyman that he was fighting. So by that token, I will give a bit of leeway to basically see what he does in his comeback fight, whether he goes with boxer or matchroom. In his next fight, I want to see how he looks, and if he looks better, if he looks like he did closer to the first Yarde fight, or even the Buatsi fight or the Anim fight, then I can maybe move him up the list a bit. But for right now, he's got to be number 7. Right, number 6, Dan Azeez. Now, I actually wanted to put Dan higher because I feel that Dan's style gives loads of people problems at 175. I feel like he could beat legitimately at least 7 of the 10 guys that's on this list. Dan's tough. Not only is he tough, he's got great upper body movement. He knows how to move his head. He can take a shot, and he knows how to nullify height and reach advantages of his opponents. But I can't just go on eye test. I've also got to go on the resume. Like, what have you done? Who have you beat? And the Hosea Burton win, like, he basically dominated every second of that fight. It was an amazing performance, but it was still just Hosea Burton. Now, yeah, Hosea was decent opponent, but when you look at like who he's lost to, like he lost to Buglioni. Who else? There's someone else that he lost to as well. I'm not even going to go into it. I did see it earlier on today, but yeah, when basically all of his biggest fights, so-called, like, he lost them. So he lost 3 fights, and of the 3, Ricard Bolotniks, he lost to Bolotniks as well, which, okay, isn't really I won't say that's a terrible thing, but yeah, Azeez, Buglioni, and Bolotniks. Outside of that, there wasn't too many names on his resume that I recognized. Obviously, there was the Liam Conroy win just before this one, but Liam Conroy, no, we can't really talk about that. So yeah, but that's why I put Dan at number 6. But I definitely expect him to move up this list the next time I do one. Right, my number 5 might be controversial to some, but I've got Anthony Yarde. Now, again, he had a very, very good performance on the weekend, and I think James Cook coming into the camp was a masterstroke. I feel like he was the reason he looked the way he looked in the ring. I definitely think he was instrumental in that. So, and Tunde basically said we were like a ship without a rudder, and he's basically steered them into the direction they need to be going. So I want to give all due credit to Cook for his part in the team as well. But when we look at obviously his resume, you look at who he's been in there with, right? He was in there with Kovalev, pretty much got dominated the majority of the rounds apart from round 7 where he had a pretty good one, and then round 8 where he had a very good flurry, ran out of gas, and then got knocked down by the jab just through sheer exhaustion in, what was it, the 10th or the 11th round. Yeah, you had one decent round against one good round and one okay round against a proven world-class opponent. But when we look on the resume, again, prior to the weekend, the best victory was Dex Bowman. And then if we look at the weekend, forget the WBO trinket titles, because you went a specific route for a reason. And if we're being real, the only titles of note that you've actually held within the UK was the Southern Area and now the Commonwealth. So your best victory is against a Commonwealth champion, which is below British level again. So it's hard for me to now put you above that. So even on the eye test, you could say, yep, there's a lot of potential there, and he could potentially move up again depending on who he fights next. Now, if it's Joe Smith Jr., I don't know if I'll favour him in that fight. And even the Callum Johnson one, he probably could get that one out of there, but again, that's another tricky one. But he will definitely move up the rankings quite significantly if he wins the next fight, because clearly he'll be a world champion. Unless if Joe Smith Jr. wins, though, he might not, because Joe Smith Jr. is on his last fight with Top Rank. He could quite easily leave them, and like, if he leaves, then you don't get that title shot next. So we'll see what happens. But yeah, right now I've got Yarde at number 5. Now, number 4, I've gone for Callum Johnson. Now, Callum has been majorly inactive over the last couple, 2-3 years. But to his credit, I think he's had like 3 fights now in, say, the last 10 to 11 months. I could be slightly wrong, but I know there was the Markic fight. He had that other quick blowout the other day. And obviously now he's got Joe Smith Jr. coming up. Now, he did well against Beterbiev. Obviously, it wasn't the best of performances, but he did drop Beterbiev, second person or the third person to do so. Yeah, he got taken out in 4 rounds, but he did show that he was of a decent enough level. And if I look at who his best wins are, you could maybe say Markic, who was supposed to be like the number 1 guy in Croatia. Didn't look great in that fight, but that was his first fight back after like 2 years out the ring, 2 and a bit years. But he's also beat Buglioni, who was a reigning British champion with several defences. I think he was 1 defence away from actually from being able to hold the title outright and actually get his own version. So I think he had 2 defences, and then that was the third one. He just couldn't quite make it over. But as a British champ, Buglioni was credible. So if I was to say those were his best wins, I would have to say those 2 best wins were better than Yarde's 2 best wins, which is the only reason why he's above him at this time. So yeah. Now, my number 3, and bear in mind, some of this list I'm not particularly happy with, but I'm trying to be impartial and look at a couple things, yeah? But my number 3 is Joshua Buatsi. Now, I'm not a huge fan of Buatsi at present. Like, there's been quite a few slipping and sliding movements. He's not taken certain fights he was supposed to take. He's pulled out of a couple fights. He's taken time off when he wasn't supposed to. But on the eye test, I personally don't think he's that special, and I feel like he's ready to be found out by someone that's good enough to do it. And there's a couple people on this list who I would even expect to do that. But I'm not just looking on eye tests, and I'm also looking on the record and kind of who you've beat. Now, I want to check something real quick with regards to this box rec. There's a guy, I'm gonna try and remember this brother's name real quick. Yeah, box rec. So Josh fought I think he's fought a couple of the guys that Anthony Yarde fought and beat them in better fashion. So, okay, so you had the Renault Quinlan fight, Tony Avalon, that's the one. So you had the Avalon fight where he beat him in 1 round, whereas it took Anthony Yarde, I think, 9. So realistically, if you look at common opponents and what they've done together, like, I think every common opponent he had with Yarde, he beat them quicker than Yarde did. So that's one reason to kind of put him up there. He's got that little spite in him as well. I mean, the Ryan Ford fight, he beat Ryan Ford with a low blow. The referee decided to ignore it. So he's definitely got a little bit of nastiness in there, as much of a gentleman as he might act outside the ring. Bolotniks, obviously, we know that he definitely went low a couple times there, even just to catch his breath. The Santos fight, I mean, obviously there was the secondary punch when he was on his way down, which he even regretted in the moment. Santos was just out. But I mean, the Chalic fight was a good win. The Bolotniks fight was a good win. Santos, can't really give him that one as such, but Ryan Ford's alright, and Paraban was an alright win, as you know, a former champion at a weight class below. But ultimately, look, the resume is better than several others on here, and he has been previous British champion as well, so he is of that level. And yeah, as much as I necessarily didn't want to have him that high, I have to be objective, and I feel like he is in that top 3. But he could drop depending on next opponents or what he does next moving forward, but he could also rise. Now, my number 2, and this one was hard for me, but I'm going to be objective again. My number 2 opponent, my number 2 top light heavyweight in the country is Craig Richards. Now, everyone knows I champion Craig as I've always championed him as the number 1, as the best light heavyweight. And his record is a bit deceptive in like 17-2-1. Okay, look, I can't dress up the Sugden draw. I know the story behind kind of how it happened, but ultimately it is still a draw with Chad Sugden. And I get bantered in the Discord endlessly about Craig needing to right that wrong. He say he needing to get that rematch. He's got unfinished business with Chad before he wants to talk about world titles. It frustrates me, but I have to take it, because ultimately you got a draw when you shouldn't have. So that's being real. The 2 losses, there was no disgrace losing to Buglioni, especially under the circumstances. You know, taking the fight on 4 days' notice without training or anything, and still going the distance, and actually having a lot of success at the first start of the fight. But again, it is a loss. Now, what kind of brings Craig up to this level, though, is on the domestic scene. He is absolutely correct. He has fought the most amount of domestic opponents who were of note at the time when he fought them. You got Buglioni, you got Jake Bull, you got Shakan Pitters, you got Andre Sterling. Now, at the time, remember, most of these guys were either undefeated or only had like one loss on the record. So you have all of those. Then you get into the Bivol fight, where regardless of what I scored the fight at the time, everyone knows what I scored it. Like, it's on video in 2 separate lives, so it's not something I'm trying to rewrite history about. But I still felt that he was competitive in the majority of the rounds and gave a really good performance, where if he maybe had stepped on the gas a little bit sooner, he quite feasibly could have won that, or made it even more difficult for Bivol. That did tell me that he was ready for the world level, and whether it was that title or a European or something, like, he's of that ilk. Since then he came back, 6th round stoppage at the O2. I was there. I saw that fight live. I was actually went to ringside to watch the actual knockout of the fight, and yeah, there was a couple moments in there where maybe he seemed to look like he was just going through the motions, but when he decided to pick it up, stepped on the pace, bang, got his man out of there. And obviously there's another person whereby at 168 he was probably draining himself down a bit, you know, being 6'3" and a bit, trying to drain yourself down to 168 pounds, and obviously you're naturally bigger than that. Yeah, I'm confident that it was taking some of his power, because since he's been at light heavyweight, the majority of his victories have all been by stoppage. So yeah, I'm confident that skills wise, person that's actually also well traveled, like as we know, he's currently in America at the minute. He's been getting work in several gyms over there. He's been doing that for quite a bit of his career, just going around different gyms and sparring people, trying to learn new things. I feel like he's probably one of the most versatile in the light heavyweight division. And also, let's be real, if you can be shorter than someone by like 3 inches and still out jab them, that's a skill in itself. And him doing that with Pitters, regardless of what level Pitters may have been at the time, it shows you the levels there. So hopefully in his next fight he gets to prove even more, and he could potentially go back to being number 1 on my list. But my number 1, I don't really think there's any argument to this, to be totally honest. Callum Smith. Now yes, Callum's only had 1 fight at light heavyweight, but it was against Castillo, who had never been knocked out before. I think he might have been down a couple times, but in the Bivol fight, I mean, yeah, he lost that fight quite significantly, but he was never like truly hurt at any point in that fight. Even in the other fight he lost with Marcus Brown, it wasn't, you know, sort of a devastating beating either. But again, not down in that he was very game. He was very respected as a light heavyweight. Callum Smith comes up from 168 and like one of the most uncomfortable knockouts of this year, like you'll ever see. Like Castillo was, it was scary. Like you thought that this guy could literally, you know, possibly lose his life that night. That's how it seemed. Like his body shut down in a way that I've not seen in a while. And that's off of 1 fight. So clearly you've got Callum Smith, who's now with Buddy McGirt. Buddy is an excellent trainer. You could see the improvements in the fight. And outside of that, if we're being real, as much as I believe that John Ryder did actually beat him at 168, he still got that victory. He's a former legitimate world champion. Like, no baby belts, no trinket titles. Like, he had the diamond belt for the WBC, and he had the legitimate WBA Super Championship. You know, his records and the people that he beat George Groves, who I believe would beat the majority of the guys on the list, if I'm being real. Who again, legitimate world champion, had a very lackluster performance with Canelo, but being real, that it was time for him to move up. Like, he had been at 168 way too long, but out of all the Canelo opponents, he's the only one that went the distance out of all the super middles. So you take all of that into consideration, and he has to be number 1. And I do think he is now the most dangerous threat to everyone that is on this list at 175. Now, of course, 1 loss, 1 win can change it for anyone on the list, so we'll see. But yeah, that's the list. So number 10, John Ryder, controversial, and I'm happy to remove later on down the line. Number 9, Shakan Pitters. Number 8, Rocky Fielding. Number 7, Lyndon Arthur. Number 6, Dan Azeez. Number 5, Anthony Yarde. Number 4, Callum Johnson. Number 3, Joshua Buatsi. Number 2, Craig Richards. Number 1, Callum Smith. Put your list down in there in the comments below. I'm sure there's going to be some people not happy with mine. Cool, like, you can disagree, put it down there, tell me why you disagree, who should not be in there, who should be, what your issue is. I'll get back to everyone when I get a chance. Again, like and subscribe. But for right now, Hardcore Casual out.